Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar on stakeholder engagement and social dialogue. I see that folks are trickling in. So yes, I can get kind of started with the introductions. So hi, my name is Tadra'o. I am Whole Society Analyst at the NDC Partnership. And today I'll be talking a little bit about the housekeeping before we go into things, and also talk a little bit about the interpretation options that we have available, as well as a little presentation on stakeholder engagement in terms of statistics and whatnot. Yes, and next slide. Yes, so for today, we're pleased to offer interpretation in Spanish and French for this session. If you would like to listen to the webinar in a language other than the default language, please follow these instructions. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, click on the icon that looks like a globe to access interpretation settings. And once you click on the interpretation icon, a pop-up window will appear showing the available languages for interpretation. And from there, you can select your preferred language from the list. So today we have English, French, and Spanish. And then to hear the interpretation clearly, mute the original. We recommend that you mute the original audio to avoid overlapping sound. Great. And then I also, next slide, I have just a little bit of notes on housekeeping. So for today, please use the chat function throughout the session to share comments, resources, or engagement with other participants. We also encourage that you introduce yourself and share which organization and country you're joining from. And if you have any questions for the speakers, also please use the Q&A function. And as for today, all materials from today's sessions, including PowerPoints and highlighted resources, will be shared via email following the event. And a note on recording, please note that this session will be recorded for future reference and will also be shared on the NDC Partnership YouTube channel. So by participating in the session and by having your camera on or participating via voice, you consent to being recorded. Yeah, and that's all for the notes for housekeeping and interpretation. So thank you for your attention on these notes. We're excited to have you today to join us on this discussion on stakeholder engagement and social dialogue in collaboration with ILO. And we really hope you find this session to be informative and engaging. And now I'll get started to present some statistics and trends on stakeholder engagement that we've received at the NDC Partnership. So here on the note, so these are like the requests that we received on stakeholder engagement at the NDC Partnership. And what do we mean by engaging stakeholders or stakeholder engagement here at the partnership? So we've defined it as consultation of multi-stakeholder groups for effective NDC implementation. And this encompasses formal and informal mechanisms to engage diverse social groups in the climate agenda. So a lot of different actors coming together to talk about NDC implementation. And so far, we've received 1,150 requests on engaging stakeholders from 97 countries. And 68% of these requests are actually supported, which is actually higher than the overall rate of support that we see across the partnership. At the partnership, the average support rate stands at around 56%. So we really see a high number of support in this specific type of request. And on my next slide, I wanted to also highlight the request trends on stakeholder engagement that we've seen at the partnership. So engaging stakeholders is an activity type that we have that we tag to the requests that we get from the countries. And as you can see, there was quite a peak back in 2019, and there was a bit of a decline, but stakeholder engagement as a request type has been really increasing since 2021. And then we saw such a large peak back in 2024. And this is because, you know, as countries are preparing their NDC 3.0, there is a lot of need for engaging with different types of stakeholders. And with that in mind, we have received a lot of requests on stakeholder engagement. And right now in 2025 as well, we already have 109 requests, and we're still in the middle of the year. So we anticipate that there'll be more requests on stakeholder engagement that we'll see throughout the year. And to kind of give a bigger picture of stakeholder engagement as an activity type across the different types of activities that we see, stakeholder engagements is the sixth most popular form of requests received by the NDC Partnership. So capacity development is one of our highest requested activity types of the partnership, as you can see. And then after that, it's followed by developing or updating MRV and M&E systems. So stakeholder engagement in the larger scheme of things is still in like the top 10 kind of requests that receive from countries, showcasing an interest across a lot of different countries involved in NDC stakeholder processes. Yes, and then for my last slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a better understanding of what does it mean to actually engage stakeholders, because in the previous slides, I've kind of given introduction on the explanation, on the definition, as well as some statistics, but what does it mean to really engage stakeholders, and how does it look like in the requests that we receive from countries? So in this instance, I've drawn out two requests, so one from Costa Rica and one from Chad, and these are the, I would say, the two most common type of requests that we receive from a lot of our country members. And for instance, in the case of Costa Rica, so as part of a global call request, which is a request type focused on NDC 3.0 development and implementation, Costa Rica requests to develop a stakeholder engagement strategy to formalize the responsibilities of stakeholders in NDC implementation. So this includes a lot of different stakeholders, such as government, ministries, private sector, civil society, and academia. So you can see in this request, countries are looking at stakeholders in a holistic manner, having them engage in all different parts of NDC implementation. And this, I would say, is the most common type of requests that we receive at the partnership on stakeholder engagement. And then the next one example that I have is from Chad, which is that Chad requested support for a detailed 5-year gender and climate action plan. And in this request includes engaging with various stakeholders such as ministries, local authorities, civil society, and private sector. So in this sense as well, it's a lot about engaging a lot of different type of stakeholder groups, but in this case, it is more topic specific. So in this case, gender. And we also get a lot of different types of topic specific stakeholder engagement requests, whether it be on gender, whether it be on youth, or whether it be on finance as well. So those are, I would say those are the most common type of stakeholder engagement requests that we get at the partnership. Yes, and this kind of ends my short introduction on what stakeholder engagement means across the partnership and the types of requests received and the, what are the examples so far. So for now, I'll turn it over to Alice to talk, who will talk a little bit more about social dialogue and stakeholder engagement. Alice, over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just start by sharing my screen. All right. Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are connecting from. I'm really happy to be with you. Today is our second engagement in this series of webinars, and a few months ago we had the first introductory webinar on just transition in the context of the NDC. So in a way, what is happening today is that we are continuing this discussion, unpacking how to continue the promotion of and integration of just transition principles in NDCs through specifically stakeholder engagement and social dialogue. My name is Alice Votz. I work for the International Labour Organization as a policy specialist in the Action Programme on Just Transition. I would like just to, without repeating what was already presented in the previous sessions, I would like to just remind ourselves what we mean by just transition and why it is so important in the context of the nationally determined contributions, and then how that links to social dialogue specifically, and more broadly to stakeholder engagement. The ILO has been actively promoting just transition to a low carbon economy since the last decade. And in 2015, in particular, we drafted and published the ILO Just Transition Guidelines that were then formally adopted by our International Labour Conference in 2023. In that period of time, we had the opportunity to work with several countries, with our constituents that are government, employers and workers organizations, in the promotion of the principles and through the different policy areas that are included in a just transition. Just transition is about maximizing the social and economic opportunities of climate action, while minimizing and managing as much as possible the challenges and also the unintended consequences that can derive from either climate change or climate action and response measures. So this is the policy framework. It is acknowledged and recognized by the Paris Agreement as well, and it's considered a crucial element to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. When we discuss just transition, we also introduced the several policy areas. There are 9 policy areas that are considered crucial, cutting across macroeconomic, industrial, sectoral policies, but then going specifically into enterprise, skills development, occupational safety and health, social protection and active labor market policies. And then there are cross-cutting areas, and one is the topic of our discussion today, which are related to social dialogue and tripartism, which should be part of any just transition discussion and action and policy that is taking place at country level and global level, based on fundamental principles and rights at work as well, and international labor standards. So today, we want to discuss social dialogue and stakeholders consultation as an enabling factor for a just transition and as a key ingredient for just transition processes to take place at country level. Also to remind ourselves of why just transition is important in the context of the current updating of NDCs. Many countries have already submitted, other countries are in the process of submitting their updated commitments. We consider as the ILO that the participation of tripartite partners and broader consultations at country level can contribute to meet both social and economic goals and job creation and decent work promotion objectives, while committing to climate action and environmental sustainability. Very often, these dialogues also open up the opportunity to discuss specific bottlenecks in the labor markets, such as accessibility to job opportunities, skills and technology issues that countries may face, but also how to ensure that solutions proposed are benefiting the larger population. So it's for us always a matter of just transitions for all, and particularly taking into account the needs of more vulnerable situations. So what is, in a nutshell, social dialogue? And here what I want to do is just to clarify a couple of concepts and where they come from. And then I will actually be assisted by a wonderful panel of speakers that will help us unpack the concept of social dialogue through concrete examples at country level, but also subnational level and community level. Social dialogue comes in the ILO, since the very beginning of and the foundation of the ILO in 1919. It's our decision-making process is based on a tripartite format where we bring together governments with their social partners, and social partners being the employers' organizations and the workers' organizations in the different countries and globally. So since the very beginning and in the governance of our organization, any decision, and particularly the promotion of ILO labor standards and rights, are based on social dialogue through our internal mechanisms of our International Labor Conference, and then the follow-up also for implementation at country level. It has been also a concept that has been reiterated over the years in some specific moments, in particular when we adopted our decent work agenda in 1999, which is based on the 4 pillars of employment, social protection, social dialogue, and labor standards. But also, more recently, and coming to our discussion here, social dialogue has also been reconfirmed as a critical dimension in the promotion of a just transition. So it is present explicitly in the guidelines and in the text adopted in the resolution in 2023. However, when then we look into practice and what is happening at the country level, and in the text of the NDCs that are being discussed, we actually see that references to social dialogue or to either one or the other of the social partners, workers or employers, are still very minimal, as you see from the percentages on the screen. So how can we make sure that the engagement of the labor market institutions and social partners is a meaningful one? And how can we ensure that at the core of our climate policies, there is more participation and consideration of the world of work and employers and workers' organizations? For the dialogue that we're going to have today, we agreed also with the NDC Partnership that we will structure it in, let's say, in 2 parts. Strictly the social dialogue dimension, which is the one that is in the spirit of the ILO governance and system, so the interaction between government, employers, and workers, and then broader stakeholder consultations, which in the context of a just transition is considered absolutely crucial, because there are segments of the society that are specifically affected by climate action, by climate change, and by response measures. And therefore, how do we engage beyond strictly the tripartite constituency? How do we engage with different groups? And this is exactly the discussion that we're having today, and for which I already thank in advance the speakers for their time and availability. Maybe a few pointers for all of you while you follow the discussion. I think not only we want to stress on the importance of social dialogue, but also what are the elements and the key ingredients to make it happen. So, for example, we will also discuss through the questions what is happening in some of the NDC processes at country level, to what extent social partners are engaged, how can they raise their voices and participate more actively, what sort of capacities they need to have a more meaningful contribution, but also what type of consultation and participation needs to take place before, during, and after, when it comes to implementation of all the commitments that the countries are taking at the moment. Very often, this is also an opportunity not only to see in one direction how social dialogue is contributing to climate action, but also to see how this conversation around environmental sustainability issues can also reinforce the social dialogue mechanisms. So we really see it as a two-way process, where also we sometimes take the opportunity of having these conversations to see how social dialogue mechanisms in the countries can actually improve to be more inclusive and more effective. And with that, I would like to introduce the panel that is with me today, and that will help me unpack all these issues through a series of questions. So I will stop sharing and then ask our speakers, if possible, to put your camera on, and then I will briefly introduce the panel and then call you one by one. So we have invited 5 speakers from different countries and organizations. Mrs. Shaida Seni, who is the country facilitators for NDC in Mozambique. We have Mr. Ruben Aguirre, who is Director of Sustainable Production and Consumption from the Employers Associations of Colombia. We have Mr. Yun Farashin, who is the Secretary General of the Workers Associations in Morocco. We have Alistair McMaster, who is Director Sustainable Energy for the provincial government of the Eastern Cape in South Africa. And last but not least, we have Giovanna Reynoso Recalde, who is WASH and Climate Change Officer at UNICEF in Ecuador. So as you can see, quite a rich panel, very diverse in terms of organizations and countries. And I would like to start immediately with the first speaker from Mozambique, just checking if you are connected and if you can make yourself visible. So while we are checking if Mrs. Shaida Seni, perhaps we start then with the employers organization from Colombia, as I see you, Ruben, with your camera on. So welcome, and thank you very much for being with us. Maybe as a first question that also connects us to the overarching topic of this panel, I would like to ask you, we know that Colombia is in the process of updating the climate commitments and the NDCs. So perhaps you can tell us where the process stands. We know that there have been some consultations in the countries. So specifically on the NDC, but also more broadly on climate policies, what are the ongoing processes in Colombia?
Great, Alice. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Greetings from Colombia. My name is Ruben Goldstein. I'm the Director of Sustainable Production and Consumption at the National Business Association of Colombia. Well, in Colombia's the NDC 3.0 process has emphasized broad participation through regional and sectoral dialogues. However, it is important to clarify that the success is not about how many dialogues are held, but about the commitments and actions that follow. And this is quite important to highlight. These dialogues are a means and not to the end itself. So this is something that we would like to also to highlight in the case that you manage to organize several roundtables and stakeholder consultations and engagement processes. But at the end, what is important is just to get some effects and some actions in the process. So from the private sector perspective, we have been actively participating through organized platforms. We are working to ensure that our inputs lead to realistic and actionable outcomes, especially in key sectors or when you say hard to abate sectors like energy, industry, and transportation. So from the climate policy perspective, this is something that Andy is looking forward anytime to participate, to engage, and also to contribute not only to the policy level, but also in the implementation level. Normally, the business association as a liaison from the private sector, but also in terms of be the speaker from the private sector, but also one of our key actions is to implement and to develop initiatives, let's say focus on scope 3, focus on transportation and freight transportation in Colombia and so on. So this is something that we are being heavily engaged, and we also looking forward to submit the NDC as soon as possible because we are already late.
Thank you very much. And I really like immediately the focus on not only having dialogues, opportunities, but also the follow-up and actually translating these dialogues into concrete action. In an immediate follow-up question, if I can, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Andy, your organization being an apex body in Colombia, and how you work in engaging your members in these discussions, and maybe if you can share a successful example of engagement opportunity or strategy that has contributed to bring on board your members, maybe around a specific climate-related topic.
Good. And this composed mainly from private sector organizations. We have 1,600 affiliates, 36 chamber and sectoral chambers, including different sectors across Colombia. Most of the companies that participate in ANDI or the affiliates represent around 55% of the GDP of the country. And we have quite diverse structures, not only multinationals, multi-Latin companies, but also startups, scale-ups. So we have a diverse multi-system and a universe of several organizations that are part of ANDI. And in this case, we are present in 13 areas in Colombia, and the idea is to move forward from the private sector in order just to generate this impact and to participate in order to contribute not only to climate policy, but on social development and closing the gaps, especially in Colombia is a very unequal country, especially on a multi-dimensional poverty level. But this is something that is one of our challenges ahead. From Andy, one example is that we have developed as a key strategy to engage results. So we have developed different initiatives, especially on procurement. And this is a reflection of the dynamism of the European Union directives, especially focused on due diligence, or the directives of zero deforestation. So we have developed a platform focused on Scope 3 emission reduction, aligned with our NDC priorities. So this collaborative model brings together leading firms across the world to coordinate ESG actions, supply decarbonization strategies, and traceable emission reductions across the value chains. So again, we try to translate different dialogue spaces into concrete action. And also another case that I would like to highlight is this Climate Action Roundtable led by the Ministry of Environment, and that allows business representatives to contribute to the design of regulatory frameworks, not only for carbon market, but also on nature-based solutions. Again, and this is something quite important, the idea is to accelerate these decisions, not only on mitigation actions, but also on adaptation measurements, because this Colombia, as you know, maybe we are a high vulnerable country in the world, one of the most vulnerable. So we need to develop key actions in order to address these situations, especially on territory. This is one of the several examples that we're working on the front end, either procurement and also on the transportation and distribution of several materials.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these very concrete examples. Please remain with us as I move to the next speaker, and then we will get back and in the meantime monitor the questions that are coming through the chat. And I'm happy to move on to the workers' organizations, and we have a representative from Morocco, Younes Firashin, and thank you very much for being with us today. Perhaps in a similar manner, I would like to ask you, first of all, we know that Morocco is also currently reviewing its NDC, and that we have also supported a little bit some research process in the country to inform the objectives of the NDCs and how workers' organizations can be more involved in the process. So perhaps you can start telling us from a workers' representative perspective, how are you engaging in the NDC process, through which specific actions?
Oui, merci. Je vous remercie d'abord pour l'initiative et pour cette réunion très importante qui parle d'un enjeu capital, comment faire en sorte que la transition soit juste, respectueuse de droits de l'homme et en particulier des droits des travailleurs. Pour nous, à la CDT Maroc et au mouvement syndical en général au Maroc, on considère la révision de l'ACDN, la contribution déterminée au niveau national, comme une opportunité essentielle pour intégrer les principes de la transition juste dans les politiques climatiques au Maroc. Et nous faisons un effort, nous contribuons en tant que représentants des travailleurs au Maroc et on a contribué sur trois niveaux essentiels. D'abord, par la recherche, en analysant les impacts de la transition sur l'emploi, notamment dans les secteurs sensibles comme l'agriculture, comme l'énergie et encore les transports. Ensuite, par le plaidoyer. Par le plaidoyer, en participant aux consultations nationales et en défendant aussi l'inclusion des travailleurs dans la transition écologique avec des mesures concrètes d'accompagnement. Et enfin, par la mobilisation syndicale, en formant aussi nos représentants et en sensibilisant nos militants, nos bases sur ces enjeux pour qu'ils deviennent eux-mêmes des acteurs de transformation. Donc, pour nous, ce sujet n'est pas seulement technique, mais il est imminent, politique, social et humain. Et pour nous, il doit reposer sur un socle clair, le dialogue social, la participation active de toutes les parties prenantes et bien sûr la justice sociale.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, indeed, for flagging the current enhancements process of the NDCs as an opportunity to promote just transition through the different levels of intervention, really a research-based process and anchored through national consultations and advocacy. Maybe more specifically, in these engagement processes, either with government or with business and industry, we know that social dialogue can happen in tripartite or bipartite way. What do you think that makes the processes effective? What are the key opportunities, and let's say how do you make the process of dialogue effective, and what are the challenges that sometimes you may face on the ground?
Oui, bien sûr, le dialogue social est très important parce que cette transition ne peut pas être imposée d'en haut. Donc, il doit être co-construite. Et bien sûr, le cadre politique, c'est le dialogue social. Sur la question du dialogue social, il y a des avancées au Maroc, mais aussi il y a des défis importants. D'abord, je vais parler de ce qui fonctionne chez nous. Il y a l'existence d'un cadre institutionnel de concertation. On a par exemple le CESE, c'est le Conseil économique, social et environnemental. Et c'est un cadre qui permet de faire entendre la voix des travailleurs et c'est un cadre de concertation entre les différentes parties prenantes. Dans certains secteurs, comme vous avez dit, il y a un dialogue bipartite, travailleurs-patronat, et nous avons pu intégrer des clauses environnementales et sociales dans les conventions collectives, notamment dans les grands secteurs, par exemple le phosphate, la construction des voitures, etc. Et le soutien des partenaires comme l'OIT, notamment, joue un rôle clé pour ouvrir des espaces de dialogue. Et maintenant, on a un expert qui va accompagner le mouvement syndical marocain pour cette révision du CDM. Mais il reste aussi des obstacles qu'on doit soulever. Il y a un manque de coordination entre le gouvernement et les acteurs sociaux, ce qui limite un petit peu l'efficacité des actions. Il y a aussi les syndicats ne sont pas toujours associés aux décisions sur les politiques climatiques alors qu'il représente le premier concerné, et les données sur les effets sociaux de la transition sont encore un peu limitées ou bien trop limitées. C'est pourquoi nous demandons que le dialogue social sur le climat devienne institutionnalisé pour garantir des transitions équitables et partagées.
Thank you very much. Important because we start understanding also how actually social dialogue works in practice, what are the different mechanisms and how this can be enhanced, what is working, but what could also be enhanced in the future. Please stay with us as we move to the next speaker, and then we will get back to you for a final round. I see that in the meantime, as we were discussing, our colleague Shaida Seni from the NDC Partnership in Mozambique has joined us. So I would like to turn the floor to you before going to South Africa. Yes, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining us. I know during a busy day as you have ongoing consultations on that side as well. I'm very happy to have you here because we know that very recently we had a tripartite plus dialogue in Mozambique in the current process of reviewing the NDC with a focus on just transition. So maybe since this is something that has just very recently happened, you could share some insight. How was the dialogue and if there are some key takeaways that you would like to share with the group? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. That is my pleasure. I'm very sorry that I took a little bit of time to connect. As you can see, I'm in a conference room, conference center. A little bit loud sound around me, but I hope you can hear me properly. It's really my pleasure to be part of this meeting, and thank you very much for inviting me and to having me here. Well, that was really a very important dialogue that we have, because from the beginning, we normally at the process of elaboration of NDC, especially NDC 3.0, we think about just transition in various dimensions, but not so much on the just transition for work or labor thematic. And that was very enlightening for all of us to discuss and to see all the different dimensions that is important to consider the just transition for labor as well, especially in Mozambique. And we had a forum with multi-sectorial participants, and it was very wise in timing, because we are discussing within the sectorial areas in order to identify priorities for NDC, either on mitigation as on adaptation, as well on increasing of resilience and social protection. So that was in a very nice time-wise to have that kind of dialogue and to be in the format that was done with multi-sectorial participants and people that will actually promote discussion in very specific sectorial areas, as for example, IPPU, AFOLO, Blue Economy, just for mention some that are very focused on the sun of the process of elaboration of NDC of Mozambique. And once again, first of all, our focus was expecting to discuss a little bit more about just transition, country-wise, like macro level, meso level, but not in that level that we discuss about what would be the actionable measures that will be part of NDC that will prepare the countries and the societies to actually adapt themselves to the change, because Mozambique is on the stage is very undeveloped with a lot of poverty, but we are also with a lot of demographic pressure, because we have more or less 500,000 new youth coming into active segment of society. So there is a lot of pressure in our economy in order to have new jobs, pressure for the use of land, pressure on the forestry and deforestation, pressure on agriculture and all other fields as well that we have to respond. As we know, NDC has to consider as well the national circumstances, and that is a little bit dilemma that Mozambique has. In order to develop, and we have to develop as any other country, we need to have the opportunity to choose how to develop. And one way is to choose a low carbon development path. And to do so, we need so many things. Just for mention is a transfer of technology and also transfer of knowledge. And on that specific area, we have to prepare all this youth, huge, massive number of people to the new way of working, of get rent and to survive. And especially if we guide and we have well adequate policies and approach, we can choose the right way to develop and also to respond to all this pressure that we have national wise in order to create jobs, and especially to have new kind of job that is more or less emitters on and less carbon based emission. So that is a little bit the takeaway that we get from that dialogue, and that was very well received from many sectors, and especially because Mozambique wants to position themselves strategically as a cleaner energy distributor for the southern of Africa. So we have a lot of resources on hydro electricity potential and green energy potential, but we have actually to really invest on those areas in order to have a more green and more less carbon emitter development path for Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. Great to hear that the dialogue went well, and especially that it served as also as a process of awareness raising, really for the broad community to understand what we are discussing, what is our ambition. I like the way you put very much forward the importance of understanding what the country wants to become and to be, and now they want to position nationally, but also in the context of Southern Africa and globally. What are your ambitions? And then how to make them compatible with needs and with environmental goals. Maybe an immediate follow-up question would be particularly looking at Mozambique and the context of a country that is also geographically very extended and with very diverse communities with different challenges, and with also a quite clear objective related to unlocking opportunities for the youth. So how do you ensure, or what is your view in ensuring that in these dialogue processes we manage to also be inclusive, for example, from the point of view of geographical inclusion, rural areas, marginalized communities, and youth? Anything that came out from your conversations?
Well, Alice, that is a huge challenge. You can imagine how big is the country. We have like 2.7 kilometers of coastline, only to mention that, and we are very dispersed. So we are about 32 million inhabitants and very low technology infrastructure all over. So it's very difficult to reach the local level all over the country. Nevertheless, we have a strategy to the inclusion. First approach that we have is that Mozambique is quite well organized in terms of coalitions and social organizations and social civil organization, and there is a representation of many different segments of society. One approach is to bring those representatives, the voicers of these segments, into a more broader discussion and a more regular communication lines, in order to at least be sensitive and to include the sensitiveness to those segments into the NDC process. Nevertheless, we have 14 cooperation partners supporting our process of NDC, and that number of partners is really what we thought necessary to allow us to reach the local levels, the subnational level, even though there is very dispersed and we are struggling on the time as any other country to submit our NDC, and we are planning to submit it late September this year. So we are right now discussing among each sectorial areas, including all these different segments into discussion, because we want not only to take the box that we have invited, or we have a representative for a such segment, for example, youth or gender or vulnerable people, but we really want to understand what are the role, dimension, contribution that these segments as into the NDC processes and NDC implementation, how they will be affected, how they can be beneficiary, how we can actually include them effectively, not only in the process of elaboration, but also in the process of implementation, accompanying, monitoring, and report back. So that is a really very in-depth process of inclusion. So we are planning, after we have this sectorial discussion, including all the segments, to go through the provincial level at least, and bring up more local level to these discussions, in order to have to give voice to all these segments, especially at subnational level. But that is not the only approach. This too is not the only approach that we have. We have in Mozambique quite a number of local adaptation plans. And adaptation, I have to explain, that is very important for Mozambique, because first of all, Mozambique is in the corridor of multiple extreme climate events recently, and this number are increasing. And because we are a very poor country, we are suffer a lot about all these extreme climate events. So connected with the base, with the field, and bring all the vulnerable people and community into discussions, make us capable to include effectively what is realistic to our NDC, and to bring it how effectively we can include actions, measures, and activities that will make the difference for adaptation and for increased resilience at the local level. So those are the three layers that we are using to include all the communities. I wouldn't say the marginal segments of society, but actually at subnational level, which is a little bit more difficult to reach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent also to hear how organized is the strategic approach to local inclusion. That actually bridges very nicely with my next speaker, because we are also moving to another experience from a subnational level of government in South Africa. Alistair, thank you for being with us. And first of all, it would be nice to just have a little understanding of the province that you come from, Eastern Cape. If you can just briefly tell us which level of government you represent, but also what are the economic sectors brought from an adaptation and mitigation perspective that are crucial to your province.
Thanks, Alice. Yeah, I'm Alistair McMaster. I'm from the Eastern Cape Provincial Government. So in South Africa, we're next door to Mozambique. So I'm very glad to follow from Shaida. We have the national government, we call it the national sphere, then we have the provincial sphere. And then at the direct local level, we have district municipalities and local municipalities. So we have 4 levels of government. I'm in the provincial government. And the Eastern Cape is it's south of South Africa, along the coast, and in fact we experience very similar climate events, perhaps not as badly, but similar events to what was described about Mozambique. So just to go into the sectors, we are 4 main sectors. There are a number of others, but just to speak about the 4 today, it's agriculture and tourism, and then we have the well-developed automotive manufacturing sector. And then what's recently emerging is the sustainable energy sector. Just to quickly touch on adaptation, we honestly do feel the effects of climate events. And so naturally, I think the sectors that are most affected there are agriculture and tourism. Those are rural sectors in a sense, and really get affected by floods. So destroyed infrastructure, for example. These are real happenings that are really affecting lives in the province. And then droughts and heat waves affect both agriculture and tourism quite significantly. And just to go into mitigation, we're quite an export or internationally exposed economy from just in terms of international markets. So international targets for mitigation are very, very relevant for us, as well as the targets for the NDCs in South Africa, which means that it really does have an impact on the way we look at value chains, and the fact that we have to really look at decarbonizing our value chains, really making the NDCs meaningful for reasons that are tied to economic imperatives. So this definitely has an effect on from a workforce implication. And if I just maybe reflect on 2 sectors, the automotive sector, here we manufacture quite a number of globally recognized brands. And the sector employs up to 50,000 people at the various tiers of the value chains. And as we move into the next decade of decarbonization, we're having to reconfigure the way that our entire sector works. So, for example, as we transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, but also then decarbonizing the components, and that then ties to changing the kinds of skills that our workers need. And then just to move on to renewable energy as a new sector. So we've gone from a province that never produced energy at all, of any significance, to being now quite a significant renewable energy producer. We've got, just a few numbers, we've got 1,578 megawatts worth of wind and solar farms. That's 18 facilities, which 10 years we just didn't have. And so now there are times when we are actually exporting more energy than we need as a province. And what's great about this is that slowly but surely this is producing new opportunities from a jobs perspective, but it's different jobs. It's skilled jobs, but also it's reconfiguring the geographic playout of the transition. In other words, the jobs are in rural areas. So this is really something interesting for us, because we need to think about not only reskilling but upskilling, not only in metros but in our rural areas. And so great. We had a very successful dialogue among all the stakeholders, supported by the ILO, and thank you very much for that. That was just about 2 weeks ago, where we sort of worked on this consensus building towards understanding how we're going to navigate this future. So just in closing on this part, the point is that we are now exporting, but there are many more thousands of megawatts of new energy facilities that are required in terms of our national electricity plan. So we're going to have many more wind and solar facilities and so forth. And so dialogue between the stakeholders is honestly a necessity to make this work. So thanks very much, Alicia.
Thank you, Alistair, for that comprehensive overview and very interesting transformations and transitions in the Eastern Cape. An immediate second question I would like to ask is particularly from provincial government perspective. And you've heard how we are discussing different level of dialogues and stakeholder consultations. We have discussed in terms of variety of stakeholders that can be involved. So what is your role, how do you feel is your role in supporting an enabling environment, for instance, in the context of the just energy transition? Let's take one sector as an example. Which level of dialogues do you think you can facilitate, and even within the different levels of government? If you can give us a sense of, from your position being between the national and the needs of the local communities, how can you facilitate a dialogue, particularly around the energy transition?
Okay, thanks. So just interesting that I think everyone's aware how quickly things change over time, and we have to sort of keep up from a regulatory perspective. So I'll just quickly outline how things are happening in South Africa and in the Eastern Cape. But it's important to note that our basic livelihood services are provided by municipalities. So much of where the transition is meaningful is at the municipal sphere. And so from a mitigation and adaptation perspective, water, waste, energy, and transport supply are really affected. And so the question is, how do you bring this into planning processes? And how do you make our suppliers resilient while at the same time decarbonizing and meeting the NDCs? So what's interesting is that we have a National Climate Change Act that was signed last year, and that provides for climate change forums, both at the provincial and local level. But also just to note that the Act requires that municipalities and provinces need to factor climate change into their plans and decisions. So it's a legislative requirement. And the way that we make decisions in our municipalities is what's called, or the planning process is called the integrated development planning process. And by law, that involves a very significant stakeholder engagement process, almost community hall level of engagement, and involving traditional leaders, local communities, workers, industry, and so forth. And that is sort of almost a technical layout of how actually now social dialogue and stakeholder consultation and engagement is actually like built into our planning processes now. But just to then quickly speak about the enabling role around making the transition happen. So the transition happens by literally having wind and solar farms in the ground. For example, new electrons that are renewable. And to get that happening is technically complex. So our wind and solar farms are really, they're mega projects, honestly, and very complex to put into play. There are thousands of critical or risks on the critical path. And just to say that from on the ground locally, where the transition is happening, if stakeholder consultation and engagement doesn't take place, the projects do not succeed. So I just want to say that it's happening, and it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, we find that our projects come to a standstill for various reasons, unless there has been deep and meaningful engagement. And deep and meaningful engagement is taking place. We've gone through a process of learning over the last 10 years. And so far things are really improving, where there really are effective and meaningful engagement processes. So the thing that is really on our minds now is that so far we've got quite a large renewable energy fleet in the province, but going forward, the just energy transition in terms of our national plans is going to scale up exponentially. And then also take on new technologies. So, for example, we're taking on green hydrogen in the Eastern Cape. And just in our province, we have 1,780 megawatts or 578 megawatts of wind farms. We have a pipeline of another 10,000 megawatts. So in other words, there's a 10x future for us. And we will only achieve that future through a common vision, and a common vision through dialogue and consensus seeking. So stakeholder engagement is absolutely essential. And without it, I think achieving the NDCs is going to be difficult. So, but I'm very confident about the status of stakeholder engagement in the Eastern Cape.
Thank you very much. And I can confirm that it was actually a pleasure to see how the stakeholders come together a few weeks ago when we were having these conversations. And thank you very much for these very concrete examples. Please also stay with us. I see that there are also questions coming up, but I would like to first conclude the first round, and then we will open the floor also for questions from the audience. Thank you very much, Giovanna Reynoso from UNICEF in Ecuador for being with us today, and particularly for bringing a very specific dimension of dialogue, which we consider crucial in many of the countries that are also present here in this conversation, is how to work with youth and how to engage youth more successfully in the implementation of climate action, climate policies, and also in the process of dialogue. So in your experience working with youth, can you share some of the more successful youth engagement processes that have also resulted in impact in terms of the implementation of policies, and how do you think this can be done and successful on the ground?
Thank you, Alice, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. In Ecuador, we have seen that when young people are meaningfully involved from the beginning, they don't just contribute to policies, they actually help make them stronger and more sustainable in the future. At UNICEF, we believe that children and youth should be seen not only as future leaders, but also as key actors today. Back in 2022, in Ecuador, there was no youth climate agenda. So we worked with the Ministry of Environment to create an intergenerational methodology that allowed youth to co-create this policy, specifically the NDC, alongside the government, both national and local governments, private sector, academia, and civil society as well. But we didn't just invite youth, we prepared them. We offered training on climate change concepts, climate change policies, and even negotiations so they could have not just an active, but an informed participations in these dialogues. And as a result of this process, the Ecuador's second NDC was recognized by UNICEF as a child-sensitive climate policy. And this process also led to the creation of the National Strategy for ACE, which is Action for Climate Empowerment, which is another policy that UNICEF is also supporting to the government. And young people were involved in shaping key areas like education, training, access to information, public participation, and even international cooperation. And many of these same young people are now organized in networks. They will follow up the implementation of the second NDC, and they are now prepared to engage in future climate decision processes or spaces. So in short, I would say that meaningful participation of children and youth didn't just improve the NDC, but it built a foundation for a long-term leadership, ownership, but also accountability in these groups.
Thank you very much also for sharing this specific story about a child-sensitive climate policy. Very interesting experience. If you had to maybe extrapolate one or two factors of success, so it's quite impressive the work that you've done. How did you achieve success? What do you think are the key ingredients and factors that maybe other countries could take into consideration if they want to support similar processes?
Well, I think when we work together with the Ministry of Environment and we co-create this methodology that I mentioned before, we could include young people from diverse backgrounds, and that's very important. We had the participation of indigenous children, Afro-descendant people, migrant children, children from urban and rural areas in the country, so we could understand how climate change was impacting their lives. And they had a chance to participate in the same decision-making spaces. I would say that a key factor for success is the capacity building first. In UNICEF, we invest in capacity building. We develop materials that explain climate change and climate governance in a clear and accessible language. We translate all these materials, for instance, in Quechua, which is one of the most spoken indigenous languages in the country, so we could ensure cultural relevance during the process as well. And we apply all the child-sensitive climate policy framework from UNICEF in every action that we took, which help us make this policy according to the needs and the rights of children and youth. And I would say another important factor was the political will, especially from the Ministry of Environment in the country, which gave youth a real space into these national dialogues. This inclusive approach didn't just improve the NDC in the end, but also, as I mentioned, it created the foundation for a new strategy, which is the Action for Climate Empowerment strategy, that would also have this intergenerational perspective and inclusive participation, and make this a permanent part of Ecuador's climate governance. So I think that diversity brought new perspectives. This is something that we really need to look at, and priorities that made this policy, I would say, more relevant and grounded in people's real needs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please also stay with us. We are going now to have a final round of one question each. And in the meantime, we are also looking at what questions are coming from the floor. So some are specifically directed to some of the speakers. I will flag that. And then there are some general questions. So I would like to start again with Ruben, Colombia. And now maybe looking ahead, looking at next steps and the future. And I remember you placed a lot of emphasis on the follow-up to the dialogues. So considering the key sectors and priorities for climate action in Colombia, how can business be better equipped to contribute to a just transition in practice? So both in terms of managing risks, but also creating opportunities.
Thank you, Alice. Well, we see us to contribute effectively to a just transition. Businesses need three key enablers: clarity, capacity, and coordination. First, clarity in regulation or in policy regulation is essential. Clear, stable, and predictable policies give companies the confidence to make long-term investments in low-carbon technologies and innovations. When signals are inconsistent, investment is delayed and risk increases. This is somehow quite clear and quite direct, frankly, but not all the times happen. Second, capacity building must go beyond large companies. We are focusing on supporting small, medium enterprises and suppliers in understanding climate risks, developing emission inventories, and implementing ESG practices that take some time to make them feasible on the ground. If the transition is only led by a few, it won't be just scalable. And especially when you compare the vision from the global north and the global south, of course, there is a huge gap in terms of understanding and in terms of finance needed just to implement actions on the ground, as I mentioned before. And third, coordination is critical, and to successful transition requires cooperation between government, businesses, workers, and communities. And we promote multi-actor platforms to align goals and pool resources and co-create solutions tailored to local realities and the local context. This is not essential if you work on, let's say, in Bogota, the main capital of Colombia. I'm going to the south to the Amazon, or working to the north in the Caribbean. I'm going to even up north to San Andres and Providence Islands. These are quite different approaches and quite different perspectives. And finally, we must stay grounded. This is quite important to recognize that the gap between what's planned and what's implemented is real. And ambition without action can damage credibility. And so we focus on what's feasible, what is impactful, and what is inclusive. We must prioritize social outcomes like employment, education, and equity alongside climate results. And if this is not feasible, when you try to implement any strategy, or if you try to be quite ambitious, to be honest, we have a huge gap that is represented nowadays in the actual NDC. And we don't know exactly how it's going to be, the pathway to, to achieve it. So many challenges ahead, but we have to be really grounded on what's going on. That will be my key 3 enablers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So clarity, capacity, coordination, and stay grounded. I really like the way you structure it very clearly. And thanks again for being with us. Moving on to the workers' organizations, again, a similar question for Younes, looking ahead and considering the key sectors and priorities for climate action in Morocco. What supports do workers need to actively contribute to a just transition? I know some issues have been emerging also, for example, in terms of skills, protection, participation, but what do workers need to play an active role?
Merci Alicia. Donc, pour que les travailleurs soient pleinement acteurs de la transition, ils ont besoin, je vais dire, de 3 formes de soutien et d'appui. Premièrement, des compétences. Il faut former et requalifier massivement, notamment dans les métiers verts. Il faut que la formation doit être accessible, gratuite et répond aux réalités du marché du travail. Deuxièmement, la protection sociale. La transition ne doit pas rimer avec exclusion. Il faut protéger les travailleurs affectés avec des dispositifs solides, indemnité, retraite, santé, reconversion, etc. Et troisièmement, je dirais une participation active. Rien ne peut se faire sans les travailleurs. Ils doivent être consultés, impliqués, écoutés à tous les niveaux, de l'international au national et au niveau aussi local. Pour nous, les changements touchent tout le monde, mais pas de la même manière. Il y a les femmes, les jeunes, les populations rurales, les travailleurs dans le secteur informel, les personnes vivant dans la pauvreté. Tous ont des expériences différentes, des besoins aussi spécifiques et des propositions à faire. Donc, il faut que leur voix soit entendue. Donc, on doit aller vers des processus participatifs profonds. Donc, l'engagement inclusif n'est pas seulement inviter tout le monde autour de la table, c'est donner à chacun les moyens réels de s'exprimer, d'être écouté et de co-décider. C'est ça le plus important. Et je terminerai en disant que la transition ne sera juste que s'il est social. Et il ne sera accepté que s'il est concerté. Et il ne réussira que s'il est inclusif. Et pour ça que les syndicats au Maroc et partout dans le monde, j'imagine, sont prêts à jouer le rôle. Mais pour cela, il faut une volonté politique forte, des moyens et un changement de culture. Il faut passer de la décision technocratique à une gouvernance partagée. Merci.
Et merci à vous. Thank you very much. Not only engagement, but active participation. And to facilitate that, we need capacities and support and protection for the workers to be able to play an active role. Thank you very much. Let me move on to the next speaker, Shaida. I would like actually to turn to you the question that emerged from the chat I think there is a question on how can partnerships between government, civil society, and the private sector enhance ambition on sustainable development and climate goals. I don't know if Shaida is still connected with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you're there. I couldn't see you. So yeah, let's have a look at this question that came from the chat, which is very similar to the one that I would have asked you. So I think I've merged. And how can partnerships between government, civil society, and the private sector enhance climate ambition?
Well, thank you, Muhammad. I saw the chat, the question in the chat. I think this is a very in-depth questions, and is one of those questions that all of us as a climate facilitators or the engagers of the process have to take us with us as at the back of our mind all the time, because like in all climate action or to cope with the change, to do a just transition, we have to think that for a sustainable approach of a climate action, we have to think about on mindset change and mainly a change of behavior. If we are thinking about that, like in more in depth, in the change of society, in increased resilience to climate change and all that, we need to have all society together with the same visions and for the same targets in the future. So that means that everyone has to change the way that people live, the conditions, the way that we use energy, for example, biomass, especially, and that somehow will make us change the way that we act in our day-by-day routine. Just to give you a very specific example that is very suitable for Mozambique, one of the main source of emissions that we have are deforestation and use of biomass, because we have an increased number of population, as I already mentioned, and most of this population are living in rural areas, and they have the main source of energy, the biomass. Biomass are wood from the forests that they have to deforest to have enough wood to cooking, to warm up the houses and all kind of approaches. So, for example, if we want to bring a different technology or a different approach in order to save or to reduce progressively the use of biomass, we have to have, for example, the efficient stoves. But as example, in Mozambique, we have distribute more than 500,000 stoves. But at the end of the day, after doing the impact study, the one of the results of this study is that most of the families, they had the stove, but they still use the traditional way of cooking. So there was no actually change on the way that they use the biomass routinely. So there is no a decrease of use of biomass. Just to clarify that if we want a sustainable approach for climate actions that really have any results and impact for a long term and makes all the difference, we have to have a change of behavior and change of mindset, a change of the way of doing things. And you only reach that with a change of all societies, not only based on the law. So you have a government approach with law, with information access, with alternative technologies, and all other incentives for change, but also the cooperation of local communities, of civil societies, and all levels of segmentation of societies that we can reach there. So there is no way to do that just in one level.
Thank you very much. That was very clear, change of mindset and new approaches to partnerships. I would like just to allow the last two speakers, as we are running a bit late, to have final input. Alistair, there is a specific question to you on the status of community ownership for renewable energy projects in the Eastern Cape. As you answer this question, perhaps is an opportunity to also mention this specific successful story that you had on rural renewable energy mini-grids in the Eastern Cape. Perhaps that can be a nice example to conclude and to address this point.
Thanks, Alicia. And it's great actually to maybe speak about this after Shahida has spoken about the sort of rural use of biomass and the complexities and nuances around that. So this is actually quite a nice move on to that. The question around social ownership of renewable energy is an interesting one, and it's certainly one that we pursue, just acknowledging that for us, the just energy transition is about not only moving from one form of energy to another, but moving from energy poverty to energy security. And how that's owned and how the people have agency for their livelihoods around that is very interesting for us. So it's really about sort of making the SDG 7 on sustainable energy really meaningful. Just as an example of how we've gone about this is the example of the Upper Blinkwater mini grid. It's a project where there is a community that is technically difficult to access from an electricity point of view. It's in quite a remote rural area, and it had no prospects of receiving electricity in the short term, and so they were using biomass, for example, for cooking and paraffin and other unsafe forms of fuels. So we, together with quite a number of national and international and local partners, initiated the construction of this mini grid to kind of showcase the possibility of remote, rural, high-quality electricity. So it's for 57 households using solar power, wind, and batteries, and then the sort of high-technology automated management system. But the core principle, even though it's sort of high technology, is that the mini grid was meant to be designed and has been designed and constructed with stakeholder inclusion at the core, and particularly community inclusion. And so in this instance, before the design actually began even, the question of working with the community to understand what their energy needs were, their willingness to have a mini grid, for example, rather than other types of energy, understanding what their uses of energy would be. For example, would it be cooking? Would it be for refrigeration? Would it be for washing appliances? Or washing appliances. In other words, it helped us to understand how much energy they needed, when they needed, and that was what informed the final design. And the consultation process, every single step involved working with the community, and so much so that the final design was signed off by not only the municipality and other spheres of government, but also by the community leaders. So, we also looked at local job creation and training local people to be part of the construction process. So there really is a sense of if you talk about ownership of renewable energy, there's a strong sense of ownership of the mini grid by the community. They actually have the key to the facility, and so even though technically the requirement is that the municipality must be the licensed, must hold the license for the mini grid, and technically the municipality must operate the mini grid because of various laws in South Africa. The community certainly treats the mini grid as theirs, and so really for us, I mean, one of the big learning points here is that engagement at a local level for local change is absolutely crucial, even though engagement at high levels right up to the national regulators has been so important. Yeah, so the transition and sort of meeting local goals is crucial.
Thank you very much. I also like really this bridging between the previous experience and then the example that you brought in terms of community engagement by design, and then how this was keys to the success of the experience. Last but not least, Giovanna, back to you. I would like actually, because this is also the concluding point for the panel, maybe we can take this comment that we have in the chat about no one must be left behind. I know it's not a question, it's more about a message and a comment. So from your perspective, looking ahead and the strategies that you have in place, how can we ensure that no one is left behind?
Yeah, fully agree. And I think Ecuador's NDC 3.0 process is a strong example of inclusive and coordinating planning. The country made a strong effort to ensure inclusion by applying three cross-cutting approaches in this policy, which are the gender perspective, the intercultural lens, and of course, the intergenerational approach that I just talked about. And with UNICEF and another UN agency support, the Ministry of Environment led a national consultation processes in different territories that included, of course, youth. And in our case, it didn't stop with NDCs. We used the same participatory approach to involve youth in the development of the National Adaptation Plan, the National Mitigation Plan. And this helped us to ensure that all Ecuador's major climate policies reflected the voices of children, of adolescents, and indigenous communities and the civil society. And I think these processes were not isolated. They were part of a coordinated national effort to create this inclusive foundation across the climate agenda. And of course, we faced some challenges. One of the major challenges was the technical complexity of climate policy, which is why we created these simplified materials to talk about NDCs, to talk about climate change, children vulnerabilities, and climate change governance. So these participants could understand better and express their ideas and priorities in a better way. And another big challenge was access, specifically for people living in remote areas like the Amazon or rural zones. Many of them had limited internet access, for instance. So in this case, we organized in-person workshops, and we created educational tools adapted to their local context and needs. So maybe the process wasn't perfect, but it showed that with the right tools, with the right support, children, youth, and other vulnerable population can truly engage in climate policy making. And most important, I think that it left behind all these methods, materials, and partnerships that will last far beyond any single policy cycle. Thank you.
And thank you very much for these concluding remarks, and thank you everyone. Let me again thanks the panelists, Giovanna, Alistair, Yoon, Ruben, and Shada for being with us, for managing the time with me. Thank you very much. Sorry, we went a few minutes beyond time. Over to you. I guess you want to recap and conclude. And thanks everyone again for your participation.
Thank you, Alice, and also thank you to all the panelists for such insightful comments on discussion. I felt like I did learn a lot more from the various experiences, so huge thank you for that. And also thank you to our participants for coming to this webinar today, and thank you also to Alice for moderating this great event. Yeah, so this kind of concludes our event for today. So thank you all for participating. And before we leave, I just wanted to flag that as part of our Raising Ambition Through Partnership webinar series, we also have another event coming up on the 4th of June at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on renewables. And it's called Tripling Renewables, Powering Climate Action Across Sectors. So we hope that you could participate and join us in the next events as well. But thank you all for your time today, and we hope to see you again soon in the next webinars. Thank you all.